Welcome back to another video. Today's topic actually comes from the congress.gov site. This is the H.R. 9218 Defining Male and Female Act of 2024. This was introduced by Representative Mary E. Miller, Republican from Illinois, and it was introduced on July 30th, 2024. So far, according to the tracker, this is a bill that's just been introduced. There has been no ruling on it. Now, what is the Defining Male and Female Act of 2024? Let's do an overview. Here we see H.R. 9218. Heading to establish a clear and consistent biological definition of male and female. In the House of Representatives, July 30th, 2024. Mrs. Miller of Illinois for herself, Mr. Harris, Mr. Mooney, Mr. Gist, Mr. Self, Mr. LaMalfa, Mr. Stubbe, Mrs. Lesko, Mrs. McLean, Mrs. Luna, Mrs. Berbert, Ms. Berbert? I don't know. Lauren Boebert, Ms. Tenney, and Mr. Moore of Alabama introduced the following bill, which was referred to the Committee on the Judiciary. A bill to establish a clear and consistent biological definition of male and female. Be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled. Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as the, quote, Defining Male and Female Act of 2024, end quote. Section 2, findings. Congress finds the following. First, point. In human beings, there are two, and only two, sexes, male and female, which refer to the two body structures, parentheses, phenotypes, end parentheses, that, in normal development, correspond to one or the other gamete, sperm for males and ova for females. Point 2. Every individual is either male or female. Point 3. An individual's sex can be observed or clinically verified at or before birth. Point 4. Rare disorders of sexual development are not exceptions to the binary nature of sex. Point 5. In no case is an individual's sex determined by stipulation or self-identification. Point 6. There is increasing confusion about the definition and implications of sex as a biological truth and its relationship to concepts and terms including, but not limited to, sex assigned at birth, gender, gender identity, gender role, gender expression, and experienced gender. Point 7. Confusion and ambiguity surrounding the definitions of sex, male, female, and related terms can hinder individual efforts to enjoy equal treatment under the law. Point 8. Legal equality of the two sexes, male and female, does not imply that the sexes are identical to each other or are the same in every respect. Point 9. With respect to the two sexes, male and female, separate facilities or sports leagues established because of or organized according to physical differences between the sexes do not constitute unequal treatment under the law. Point 10. Physical differences between males and females are enduring, and the two sexes are not fungible. Point 11. To prevent further efforts to undermine the long-standing meaning and understanding of sex, male, female, and related terms, it is necessary for Congress to reaffirm and codify the meaning of these terms. Section 3. Definition of, quote, sex, end quote, male, end quote, female, end quote, and related terms. Chapter 1 of Title 1, United States Code, is amended by adding at the end of the following. Subsection 9, definition of, quote, sex, unquote, quote, male, end quote, female, end quote, and related terms. In determining the meaning of any act of Congress or of any ruling, regulation, or interpretation of the various administrative boroughs and agencies of the United States, the word, quote, sex, unquote, when referring to individuals' sex, shall be understood to refer to either male or female, as biologically determined and defined by this section. Quote, female, end quote, when referring to a natural person, means an individual who naturally has, had, will have, or would have, but for a developmental or genetic anomaly or historical accident, the reproductive system that at some point produces, transports, and utilizes eggs for fertilization. Quote, male, unquote, when referring to a natural person, means an individual who naturally has, had, will have, or would have, but for a developmental or genetic anomaly or historical accident, the reproductive system that at some point produces, transports, and utilizes sperm for fertilization. Quote, woman, end quote, means an adult human female. Quote, girl, end quote, means a minor human female. Quote, man, end quote, means an adult human male. Quote, boy, end quote, means a minor human male. Quote, mother, end quote, means a female parent. Quote, father, end quote, means a male parent. Quote, gender, end quote, means males, females, or the natural differences between males and females, unless such term is otherwise specified or used alone, parentheses, rather than with or as an adjective modifying other words, end parentheses, and a synonym for sex, and does not mean a synonym for terms or ideas such as gender identity, experienced gender, gender expression, or gender roles, and, quote, gender identity, end quote, does not mean sex or gender. Let's address some of the concerns now that I'm done with my reading. First off, there is nothing in this bill that addresses, either overtly or covertly, the naming of trans individuals. There is nothing in this bill that discusses the naming of or the legal definition for a trans person. Why does this matter? The reason this matters is because if they do not identify or legally have a definition set aside for trans individuals, that means that if this goes and gets codified into law, the very real possibility that trans individuals will not be seen as people with rights under the law. Because if you do not name or allow provisions for other groups of people who identify as a different gender or as the ability to have a different gender under the law, then legally speaking, you're glossing over the group. You're hiding the group. Whatever term you want to use, the group does not legally exist. As people who advocate for trans rights have pointed out, this is very concerning. Also, let's talk about another key point that's being brought up here. Specifically under Section 2.10, where they talk about the two sexes are not fungible. Well, what does fungible mean? The reason I bring this up is because nowhere in this Defining Male and Female Act of 2024 is there listed an exception, a provision, or a clause saying that all of the previous amendments that have been granted up to this time, that, for example, the 18th Amendment that allowed women the right to vote, the act that banned or made illegal for employers to pay women lesser just for being women compared to their male employees, or other laws such as allowing women to own bank accounts, allowing women to have their own credit cards without needing their husband's permission, or any other law or any other think of any legal rights that have been made or advanced for equality between the sexes in the last even couple decades or so. None of those are being listed in this act as being grandfathered in, because what could happen is when they say the two sexes are not fungible, well, does that mean that they're not biologically fungible, or does that mean that they're not legally fungible? And if they're not legally fungible, and if there is no clause that tells lawmakers you can't essentially you can't undo the laws, the provisions in the law that allow women to have the same equal rights and equal access to goods and services as men do, along with the right to vote. Well, could that be in jeopardy? I think there's a very real concern that it could be in jeopardy. Another thing, looking at point 9 here under section 2, when they discuss separate facilities and sports leagues established because of or organized according to physical differences do not constitute unequal treatment under the law. There is no additional legal language saying that the quality of such facilities or sports leagues needs to be considered the same as in order to give both male, in this case, both male and female sports teams the best access that can be provided. And there's no specific qualities that they list as being, well, this needs to be the basic setup of a facility, or this needs to be the basic standard for facilities to be offered for sports teams, regardless if they're male or female. You have to have for example, you have to have bathrooms, you have to have running water, you have to have provisions accessible to and conditions have to be considered livable, and the conditions have to be fair and accessible for both women and men. And there's nothing in the legal language of this law that says that the facilities, while being separate, have to have the same standard, which could potentially open up a situation similar to, or similar events that led up to the Brown versus Board of Education decision that was made back in May 17th, 1954. Also, let's go to the definitions for just male and female. Think about what they mean by historical accident. Would a hysterectomy be considered a historical accident? Would a vasectomy be considered a historical accident? Would the conditions under either of those, or leading up to the decision to have either a vasectomy or a hysterectomy, would those be considered historical accidents? How would this affect coding? How would this affect medical treatment for people who want to get a hysterectomy or vasectomy, or even say birth control, or another different type of healthcare that prevents pregnancies, prevents getting pregnant? How would that affect this? Finally, let's talk about the two words that they snuck in here: gender role. What do you think they mean by gender role? It's not just gender expression or how a person experiences their gender, gender identity, all of the things that people who argue against trans rights are focused on. No, here they're talking about gender role in addition to all those things. Could it be that with them burying gender role here in this act, they're looking at trying to undo a bunch of the reforms that allowed women to work in the workplace and participate in the workplace and be paid as much as men and be legally recognized as deserving such equal treatment in the workplace? I think there's a very real concern that this could be foreshadowing or trying to roll back some of those protections. Anyway, what do you guys think? Please comment down below in the description. Please make sure everybody knows that knows about this act. That, again, the status on the website here reads that it is still introduced. It doesn't seem to have been voted on, and there doesn't seem to be any amendments or provisions. But please reach out to your representatives and say that you are not in favor of this bill. Please list your reasons why. Please list all of your concerns. And when I say list all of them, list all of them. We shouldn't have, I feel kind of ridiculous for even having to say this in the first place, but a bill that harms or seems like it's going to harm a relatively small percentage of our population has the potential to do major damage to more of our population. And I think, based off of the language here, that this act would cause a lot more potential harm in the future if it were to get passed. Just based off of my reading and reading other people's commentaries on it. There's a lot of concerning language, and we need to tell our representatives, and we need to do our best to get our voices heard, that this act should not go through. It should not get passed. There's too many loopholes here to allow mistreatment of other people, not just people who identify as trans or queer or things like that. Thank you for watching / listening, and I will see you in the next one.